This video was originally recorded July 2019 at Menla Retreat and Dewa Spa. To learn more about Menla Retreat, please visit their website at menla.org.
Okay, so today, greetings everyone. I'm following up on the 4th of July thing, and I want to engage also talking about climate today, but as connected to the political thing. I think the first thing that I did was about the plan for the Democratic Party to realize that the political revolution is actually already taking place, or should be. And anyone who thinks that we're having business as usual, and we're just, we have like a Republican there who's like doing what they do, and a Democrat now is going to come back and rebalance, and this is how it's been. But anyone who thinks that that's the case is making a mistake, because we're in a much more extreme emergency right now. And it's emergency on every level. It's an emergency because the Republican Party is no longer the Republican Party. And it's not that it's the Trump Republican Party, it's the Trump dark money, David Charles Koch party. And, Mr. Pence, Vice President Pence, is a puppet of the Koch funding, like Scott Walker was in Wisconsin and so forth. These people are only there, he was only governor of Indiana as a Koch brother, Koch puppet, Koch protege. And he's vice president, since Trump doesn't know what he's doing. He's not conscious of what the left hand and right hand of which thing they're grabbing. he's a wild man, in short. Then Pence did the transition and appointed all the people, and he appointed all the people that the Koch people wanted, and the dark money people wanted. And what people are not really facing and not understanding is that the dark money people are not Republicans. They're libertarians. Libertarian means they don't want any government. It's not that they want a Republican-ruled government. They don't want any government. So that explains why the Republicans are not governing. You have to realize that. They have ground our government to a halt. It doesn't govern. Every person who's appointed as a cabinet secretary of every agency is destroying that agency from within. That's their job. The one who sued the Environmental Protection Agency 100 times or something is the head of it. Although now he left because he was being a disgrace, but just another similar one. A person who represents the people who are regulated by the Environmental Protection Agency are just destroying the Environmental Protection Agency. The guy who said he wanted to destroy the Energy Department is destroying the Energy Department. Every single agent, and Trump himself is destroying the entire government. He wants to destroy the Supreme Court by putting people on it who are irrational. Judge is supposed to be irrational. It isn't even, everyone is a little partisan. Okay, they have a tendency, but a judge has to be rational. And they have been doing irrational things even before Kavanaugh got on there and whatever his name was, Gorsuch. Before they got there, it was being irrational. Like speech is, money is speech, and corporations are individuals. And those are irrational things. They're not rational. Because a corporation, you join a corporation as an individual to shield your individual assets from risk, so you can take entrepreneurial risk. That's the reason for a corporation, why they're licensed by the states, not by the federal government. And therefore, a person who shields their individuality to be a corporate actor cannot then count as again an individual as a corporation. It's ridiculous. It's like thousands, corporations have hundreds of thousands of employees. So they're all operating without their individual interests being challenged of what they do, and yet they're operating as an individual, and they're sort of neck and neck with an ordinary individual. That's not rational. It's not a matter of right wing or left wing, it's simply not rational. So he's destroying the Supreme Court. He's destroyed the executive by doing all kinds of completely illegal things, and he had definitely obstructed justice. He definitely conspired with the Russians. I don't care whether he's caught making a personal phone call. He didn't have to, because he spoke to them on television. Go investigate my opponent. So he's destroyed the process of the electoral process, trying to destroy. His cohorts, who should also be impeached in the Senate, and in the House, not so many left in the House, but plenty in the Senate. Ryan was there in the House. They should also be impeached, anyone who's still in office, because they signed, like the Americans for Tax Reform thing, to destroy the financial credit of the U.S. government. So that means that they didn't take their oath of office ever, and they are again not working for the government, for the people. So it's not a matter of the government. It's not a government of the people, by the people, for the people. The point is, it's the people who are trying to destroy the government from within, occupying the government. That's what's happened. That's what's happened to America, and that's an emergency, because the American government, because of the past genius of the American people, is immensely powerful. It has a military that is 10 times the size of anybody, or 100 times the size of anybody else's. It has a terrible nuclear weapon arsenal, and it has huge polluting power. And it also licenses and builds things in other countries that pollute. And it therefore leads either in pollution or in anti-pollution. And it's run by people who deny that the government can do anything good. They don't pay taxes. The president has never paid taxes to the government. He doesn't believe in the government, and yet he's destroying it. And he's trying to destroy the power of the Congress by suing them and not giving them information they need to investigate him. He's obstructing justice even by doing that in the wide open. Everyone can see it. But they can't call him on it, because the head of the Democrats wisely realizes that if she makes articles of impeachment, then that moves to trial in the Senate, and he has co-conspirators in the Senate. So the mechanism of the impeachment is broken also. So everything is broken, so we're in a state of emergency. So the people who are running for president as the Democrats, the people who took back the House, which gives us a little bit of a chance temporarily, and who are running for president, are very brave to challenge the president in a system that has been corrupted. But they are doing so, they should be, and one of them has called, and the others seem to agree with that, for a political revolution, which means not a violent one. It means trying to still use the mechanisms of democracy to do something radical and revolutionary. And in order to do that, they must not continue to do the primary system of mutual ego fighting, and one individual comes in and then they appoint cabinet according to their tastes in a transition and hire people, and then they do the executive of the administration. We can't do that this time. That's a waste of money, and it is not capable. It won't have the power to overthrow this conspiracy that is destroying the government, and therefore by that destroying the world, actually. Now, the one person who's benefiting by this is Mr. Putin and his former KGB colleagues, who consider the greatest tragedy of the 21st century was they lost the Cold War and the Soviet Union collapsed. They consider that a tragedy, and they didn't give up trying to get revenge, so they're doing terrorism. So they backed a terrorist dictator in Syria, for example, and killed innocent people like mad. They killed innocent people in Grozny, in Chechnya. And they're ready to kill their own innocent people on the street in Russia who protest them. And all they do is sell oil. They're oligarchs now. And so they lost their power. They lost their superpower status, but they can get it back by corrupting America and going back into a nuclear arms race, because although they won't have a decent economy otherwise, all they do is sell oil, because they won't allow the creativity of their people to bubble up. They can make weapons that will threaten everybody in the world, and that will make them, they think, a superpower again. And so they are the only one who's benefiting from this complete chaos on the planet. And in a way, they're really benefiting, because they're going to be miserable. They're not enjoying being oligarchs, really. They don't know how to enjoy it, because they're playing this terrorist politics. And Trump is working for them, and Bannon, and Nigel Farage, and all of these people who are trying to destroy things like essential anti-war institutions like the European Union, like the UN. They want to destroy all those organizations so that then they can punch bigger than their weight. That's what we have to realize. So this is the emergency. So in this emergency, we don't want to have a violent revolution, because that always makes only the violent people survive a violent revolution. The most violent people survive, and then afterwards they are worse than the thing they revolted against. So that's another way of destroying a government. But these people, we have to recognize, are destroying our government. So it is an emergent, as well as the planet, with global overheating, by overheating it purposefully, and it's an emergency, and we must stop them. And we want to stop them in peaceful means, non-violent means, by political revolution. That's what Bernie called for, and he's correct about that. So I already shared with you the idea that all the candidates pool their resources, pool their charismas, pool their plans, and also debate and disagree and modify and negotiate their plans to show they can do politics. And they don't each one of them doesn't have to be the supreme winner. And then they run for the president and cabinet as a unit, as a whole, as a team, a dream team. And that's Bernie's political revolution. And then out of that team, popular acclaim could say, well, let Miss Harris, or let Miss Warren, or let Bernie, or let like a standing committee or something of the cabinet be the president. Whatever they decide, that's up for them to decide. And they should decide among themselves and offer that to the American people. Or they could have a way of polling. And we have the internet. They can poll the American people. Which one do you want living in the White House if you want someone? Or do you want no one to live in the White House, but someone to be the chair person of the cabinet meetings to make the decisions? You know, because there will be differences of opinion, because the Democratic Party is diverse, and even in the cabinet there are differences of opinion, and we were not into having a dictator, but we would have some people whose opinions, perhaps we would say we want a chairperson, you know, like they have in the English Parliament, you know. So the president is basically a chairperson, okay? Chosen for charisma, for being a good spokesperson to the people, being best in tune with all the diverse views that there are in the cabinet, and best able to negotiate with the executive and the judiciary. I mean, with the legislative and the judiciary branches. So that's the thing. But there's one other thing that now I want to do as an extension of that, and this has to do with what I call a bright money campaign. I call it bright because it's the opponent of the dark money campaign. You know, Bernie said, and a lot of people are saying, we're not going to have PAC money, we're not going to take corporate money, we just want small donations from everybody, and that way is how we're going to win, and that's great. That shows we're serious about campaign reform. Well, that's great to do, and if you're in power, you could reform the campaigns, but you can't do that successfully very well now, which is why you need because money is speech according to the rules now, which are wrong rules. I agree, they're distorted, but those are the rules. So within that, we need bright money to contest against the dark money. The dark money has already spent billions in corrupting the media. It's been going on for decades, corrupting the media, corrupting the politicians. Lobbyists have gone insane. Paul Manafort is in prison as just the most spectacular of them, who got caught, you know. But every corporation has like massive lobbyists. If you took the army of the lobbyists, they outnumber the 538 congresspersons by 10 to 1. And they have more staff, and they have better computers, and they produce legislation, and they produce bills that favor their corporation, and they shove them down the throat of the congressperson, and they say, you won't get any money to run for office if you don't print it the way we designed it. And so it has ruined the power of the legislature. It's destroyed that. put it in the hands of the corporations with the biggest lobbyists. And they've already spent billions at that, the dark money. So we need bright money. And that is because there are liberal people, democratic people, among Republicans actually, and there are, of course, among the Democrats. And there are also kind of non-liberal left-wing people and non-liberal extremist right-wing people. We know that. But in both, originally in both parties, or even in the Green Party, we should have a few more parties, I think, ultimately, be more healthy, but we don't at the moment, but we will, who are ready to play by the rules. But they need to be backed by bright money to balance the dark money in the current conversation. If you don't have bright money, that's billions, that means, against the billions of dark money, you're going to lose that conversation because they have propagandized the media and they own the Congress people. They're disenfranchising voters right and left, buying legislatures and things. And these are other, not just the 538 federal people. There's 99 houses in the states, and they are 60 of them have been bought by dark money. So only 1/3 of them are still semi-free, and even I probably have many of the legislators in those ones that are semi-free want more dark money, probably, because they've become like the system. So here's the Bright Money campaign. The Bright Money campaign gets billions from the Warren Buffett, Bill Gates type of people, the Silicon Valley oligarchs, the multi-tens of billions type of people. And between them, they are going to give half their money away. They gave it to Buffett, and Gates are giving it for philanthropic purposes when they pass away. But really, it's not sensible that they should wait till they pass away. And they don't need more than a couple billion for their lifestyle. And they don't really even need to make more billions, although billions will attract more billions. That's known. But they don't really need that. And they also are all very philanthropic, and they all want to see the planet survive, and they all want their grandchildren to have a nice, clean garden of an earth. So they put these billions in order to avoid partisanship. We don't ask them to give it to the Democratic Party. We ask them to create a special campaign with the candidate and who is the president and who is the candidate and who's the most important candidate? Mother Earth. And Mother Earth is not just the dirt, the soil. She is the soil. She is the water. She is the air. And she is the temperature, which has to do with the amount of carbon and stuff. Because she's swallowing. She usually, in balance, she uses the carbon usefully to make leaves, and trees, and plants, and give us oxygen. It takes away our oxygen. She's our partner on the planet. Our animal partner is the vegetables, right? So she needs representation in the conversation. And that's what the bright money will do. Because anyway, the dark money relates to that black oil, the petroleum people, and making food out of petroleum, making pharmaceuticals out of petroleum, making pesticides and fertilizers out of petroleum. Everything is petroleum. Roads out of petroleum. And so the dark money is that. It's the blood of the earth, But the earth also relates to the air and the ocean and the water, So the bright money is for that. So the bright money, we put some $1 billion down, a few $1 billion, get them together, and they get this idea. And then we hire all these environmental companies and people like Al Gore with his Inconvenient Truth, and Bill McKibben with his 350 degrees and so forth, and all the people with the skill for renewables, Jay Inslee, who's Secretary of Energy in the cabinet anyway, and who should be in the next administration, will be. We're going to see to it. This bright money will see to it. And then what we will do with that is we will make the causal analysis by the vast 99% of the world's scientists that the planet is in deep jeopardy. The ice caps, the oceans, the coral reefs, the soil, the plants, the mega fires, corrupted water systems, polluted, this and that. It's not just about the climate is the worst, because the oceans will rise by many yards, 20, 30 yards it will rise when the Antarctic ice thing slips off in the 2050s or 40s. In the time of your children and grandchildren, they're gone. And you young people, when you're mature and you've got your education and you've got your profession and your creation and your vocation and you're trying to help people, and you will become climate refugees. And the immigration thing will go completely crazy beyond anybody's ability to absorb it. And it will turn the world into chaos, which libertarians think they can weather because they can hire lots of people to defend them and build themselves fortresses in some place that is maybe less environmentally disaster for the time being. And then they think they'll just die eventually, anyway, when they get old. Or maybe they think they'll download themselves into computers when they get old. Who knows what fantasies some of them might have, which are pretty stupid, actually. But never mind. Let them have them. My point is, the Bright Money campaign will make the mass of people with common sense worldwide. It will leak into the Chinese dictatorship, even though their media is controlled. It will leak into the Russian dictatorship, even though the media is controlled. It will leak into any African dictatorships or Asian dictatorships. The people will realize that anybody who is ruling them or governing them should be realistic about climate overheating, or destructive, dangerous, lethal climate change. And anybody who is pretending to deny the climate, and believe me, the oil company people do know that it's happening. Their scientists told them that in the 70s. That is now well known. And even anyone who interprets scripture is telling them that it's God who's doing it, and then God can fix it. Deus ex machina sort of thing. The sensible people among all of those people will realize whatever else they think about guns, arms, skin color, gender, whatever else they think, they must really take our major emergency for real. If they deny it, they are clearly insane, and they cannot be voted for. Whatever party they run for, whatever office they run for, we cannot have people who are psychotic and think that the hurricane is coming from God rather than from the distortion of the climate by pollution. So the Mother Earth is the candidate of the Bright Money campaign. And that means that any Republican within the American two-party system, any Republican who comes up with a good climate plan and who is willing to let the military build their ships better and run on recycled oil, like McDonald's oil or whatever, or renewable resources, is fine. We're not saying they have to be Democrats. At the moment, it seems that the Democrats are being climate realistic because the Republican Party has become captured by libertarians who are trying to destroy the system. That's what you have to realize is the nature of the emergency. Actually, Donald Trump is crazy, but he does occasionally go out on a boat. He likes to go to Florida. And he knows about the weather. It's screwed up. He realizes. He plays golf. But it's just not, he's just into short-term grabbing money, and he's not spiritual. He doesn't think probably he'll have a future life. He doesn't even really care about his children. We know that. He cares about himself because he's a little bit psychologically disturbed. The only one he might like is someone he might like to practice some strange things with. He likes their bodies or something. But otherwise, he doesn't even care because he's a little bit nuts, And I don't hate him. I feel very sorry for him actually being in the position he is, where his normal kind of grab things and don't know what's going on habit is causing so much chaos and damage and so much stress on him that he can't even have fun and go out and grab, whatever doll he has in his closet, He has no time for it. So I don't. I like the man. He's kind of funny. He makes jokes occasionally that are amusing, dark jokes, but they're amusing. I don't like him wrecking other people's lives. That's intolerable, actually. And he should certainly be impeached. Oh, thank you. So it's the Bright Money it's a Bright Money campaign that we're. Oh, thank you so much. That's so kind. So it's the Bright Money campaign that I want to add to the political revolution, and it's not just in America. It's also in the context of European Union, and very much in the context of Russia. Russian people are the wonderful, intelligent, well-educated people, so many of them, fantastic engineers, scientists, marvelous people. But their creativity has not been unleashed in spite of the collapse of the Soviet Union, because the KGB managed to maintain power by getting money and being, doing gangster type mafia sort of things, and then buying up the factories and the oil things. But they have limited creativity. They're mainly into domineering other people. And so they really turned that whole country basically into an oil company and a military arms company, oil and arms company. And that really is not a creative economy. And it's very stressed. For example, when the price of oil goes down, then and then of course it's forcing its people to commit crimes, like save a criminal dictator in the country of Syria, a person who thinks they're still president of a country that they destroyed all their people, basically. A few bad guys who helped them do it are also there, but they're not going to. Such type of people, they'll never get along with each other for long once they become so violent and in such a criminal way of living, killing so many women and children and so forth. So this Bright Money campaign, some of that money will be spent to make Russian language climate commercials that will be put on, broadcasts that can be jammed and blocked maybe somewhat. There'll be the Chinese language also. That, whatever your leaders else are doing, we're not interfering in other things, but wherever they're interfering in the global environment that we're telling you about, and that's what people who are realistic will tell you about. And why am I doing this? By the way, why am I talking about this? I realize that I am not capable of doing this kind of campaign. I'm not proposing any of this for me to be leading it. I'm just trying to get the idea into a lot of people's minds who have the means to do it. And then, of course, I will do whatever I can. I'll stamp envelopes for them, whatever they want, if they do it. But in a way, Buddhism, I'm speaking as a Buddhist teacher, practitioner, I'm not enlightened, I don't claim that, but maybe a little hint of it. And, from sort of being a professor about it, studying what it is, and rubbing off a little, maybe, let's say. I don't pretend to be enlightened. That's a dangerous thing to do. And it's mistaken, in fact. Maybe it wouldn't be dangerous if I was enlightened, but since I'm not, it would be dangerous. So in the sense of a Buddha, Buddha's way more far out than me. But the reason I am is that Buddhism is a system of education. And it has 3 levels of education: a scientific education about the nature of reality, an ethical education about how one should behave as a human being on the planet like Earth, and it has a mental education as to how one should control one's emotions and one's consciousness and one's intellect and one's critical intelligence to empower oneself to bring out one's genius, which every human being can do. All of you, every being can understand everything if they really work at it. And that's why it's an education. And why is that? Why is Buddhism really an education? Of course, some people can approach it as a religion. It's like some people were educated at UCLA, let's say, and they would go rah-rah about the UCLA football team because they had a good time while they were being educated, and they opened their mind and hearts to some extent. Maybe they met their girlfriend or their wife or their husband. So then they become devoted to UCLA, and it becomes like a religion to support it as an alumnus. So in that sense, Buddhism can be a religion for some people, fine. But really, it's an education system to benefit people who get educated by it. And therefore, part of the ethical education that involves not causing harm, not killing people, not taking things from people that they didn't give to you, not committing sexual abuse on people, not lying, not speaking to cause hatred between other people with each other, not to speak frivolously and meaninglessly that has no point to it, and just distracting people from reality, and not to speak harshly and angrily and wound them with harsh language, and not to have a malicious mind, and not to have a greedy mind, and not to be completely unrealistic about the nature of life, not to be psychotic. Those are the unethical things, and the ethical things are the opposite: to be realistic, to be kind and loving, to be friendly, to be generous, to speak truth, to speak diplomatically and reconcilingly, to speak meaningfully, to speak sweetly, sing a song if possible, and to make sexuality only beneficial, loving and caring, and to give gifts rather than take things away from people, and to save lives and preserve lives rather than take lives and so forth. Those are the good things. And that involves politics when human beings live in a group, to be ethical in that way. And the reason America has been successful in recent century, although it's never been completely successful, and it's never been it's living up to its own ideals. It still did slavery, then it did Jim Crow, before that it did genocide, and it still oppresses the native people, doesn't pay them the royalties for the resources taken from their land and so on, owes them a lot of money, stole a lot of land from them, broke treaties. So we're not perfect. But the reason we've been in any way good and powerful is we've invented useful things, we've made beautiful things by releasing people's ethicality and creativity and being more loving and more friendly and more energized and less oppressed. We've gradually worked on that than people in sort of different old countries. And that's why people like America. Despite not now by destroying it though, the bad element is emerging and making people dislike it. But basically, still, we have that credibility. And that's the reason, because we've been somewhat ethical. Like we defeated the Nazis, but we didn't occupy Europe and enslave the Europeans. To that degree, we're ethical. Of course, when you fought, you get a little unethical. You just shoot and trick and do whatever you do, against an enemy when you're at war. War is inherently unethical. So, Buddhists are not, it is wrong to think that Buddhists should not involve themselves in politics. Buddhism traditionally always involved itself in politics. Buddha gave advice to kings to treat their people well. Later on in Buddhist history, kings sponsored Buddhism and patronized it because the Buddhist education helped their ministers behave well and not be corrupt and not oppress the people behind the ruler's back and not make the ruler unpopular and not steal from the ruler and so forth. And people expected rulers to behave that, and they would tend to rebel against a ruler who was too unethical. After a while, if the ruler was powerful, they were oppressed for some time, maybe generations, but eventually they cast them off. And so this education system involved itself in politics, even in systems where they had a monarch and a parliament, kind of a congress or a parliament, but rarely a full-scale democratic thing like we have in theory here and in England and so forth. With some in some of the European countries, in Japan they have a democracy, but they have a monarch. So some democracies can function with a monarch, constitutional monarch. We do a constitutional president, but we don't do a dictator president. But we're not living up to that. But so a Buddhist sees us tending to the unethical and must be activists. It's incumbent. And furthermore, we're exterminating other species by ruining the environment. And we're going to exterminate ourselves by fouling our nest, by overheating it, by paving over paradise and making it into a parking lot in Joni Mitchell's famous song. And so that's why I don't see bright money. I actually really don't. I know billionaires and I read about them and I admire some of them. But I don't see them, I see them feeling discouraged about devoting some of their billions. I'm not into taxing them all and taking them away. I think that's wrong. Some of the people in the Democratic Party are into that, and they want to be sort of threaten them, and that is a mistake. Once you get to be a billionaire, you're sort of like a government yourself. You have to hire many people to manage all the stuff. Then you worry about them being ethical or not ethical. And then you see old people lying on the street, and maybe you think that the government should do it. And maybe you don't think the government is efficient enough in doing it. So maybe you could do it better, and maybe somewhat you do is philanthropically. But you become more and more responsible once you have the burden of more and more resources, naturally. So they're not necessarily bad people just because they've been extremely, and in fact, from Buddha's point of view, if they are any billionaire, got the billion from former life generosity. That's the way Buddhists understand biology. They had that creative idea that made that thing, and they had that because they were more open-minded because they'd been more generous in the past. So they thought up a new invention, or they did something really smart. And they got that billion. There are not many gangster billionaires, actually. By pressing people, it's hard to get a billion because you end up having so many enemies. So you really do something that people want. You invent it or produce it or create it. And then that way, that's when the bigger billionaires are over that somewhat. And actually, the oil people were doing something useful up to a point until they discovered in the 70s that what they were doing was overdoing, and they were threatening people's environment. But then they became corrupt, and to make more money, they just decided to confuse people and distract them from that fact that they had discovered, and just sell more to them. And they all know it will all go to renewables sooner or later, because otherwise everyone will be dead. But they want to make as much money for themselves as possible. And that way, they're going to get enemies. And they will get enemies. And, there are violent revolutions that people have, and it's just too much. And you have all those apocalypse movies, And that will be reality if they go on like this. And they know that. The smart ones who are rich because they're smart, most of them, they know that. Like the fake rich one, like the current president, is not actually rich. That's why he won't show his taxes. He's actually in debt all over the place, And he may be a little richer now that he's president, actually, by making everybody stay in his hotel. It's cleverly manipulating the presidency into a money-making corporation, just for the president, not for the country, unfortunately. So, that's why I'm sharing this idea. I'm putting it out as a podcast. Not that many people see my podcast. I would love to have it as an op-ed somewhere in different forms. Other people could write them. I'd love to, but mainly I want to see it happen. We have no time. We're in a revolutionary mode now. Political revolutionary means revolution by intelligence. Revolution by appealing to people's intelligence, their common sense, that means. To see through the propaganda and realize that 99% of people studying reality, even as a material bunch of mechanisms, those people will come up with a correct view of what is happening to reality, which is that we have imbalanced nature. We have imbalanced our environment. We're eating cancer-producing food. We are creating flood and hurricane and forest fire and drought and conditioned environment. We're doing that ourselves. We have that, and that should as we can congratulate ourselves that we're so smart as humans by making machines to extend our intelligence, we can destroy things. And we know it, we can do that in war with nuclear weapons, we can destroy everything. And we hadn't realized that by just producing consumer goods, in making money for a few, in an irresponsible corporate manner, we can also destroy everything, just a little slower, but it's also happening. So both the nuclear weapon has to be controlled. In a way, it's like, you know those movies like Independence Day is kind of a fun movie. Will Smith, I love him. They get up and they get the alien, and all the bad guys and good guys get together temporarily to fight the alien, and there's no more, and they realize their big enemy is that one big enemy, and it's not each other. And that's what all governments should realize if they become climate conscious, climate rational, instead of climate denying. When they realize that, they would all realize there's one big enemy we're all facing. It's not any other nation. It's not the Indians, it's not the Chinese, it's not the Russians, it's not the Americans, it's not the British, it's not the European, it's not the Latin Americans, it's not the Africans. The one enemy that any nation has is the destruction of the whole of the environment by the whole of the human industrial, out of control industrial habit pattern. So it has to be a controlled industry. You can't also do it by everybody going back and living in a tent or a teepee or a hut. It has to be a controlled industrial, a responsible industrial de-escalation of the imbalance of the environment. And bright money will make that radically manifest to the common man and woman and child and grandpa worldwide. And then these demagogues, at least even the demagogues will be making demagoguery about let's fix the climate. We're not against anybody, no, we're not against Republicans, we're not against whoever it is. We're not even against dictators, unless they come and oppress us. We're not against them, but they're also human beings. But they better use their thing to make their country safe for their people. And of course, if they're nice to their people, then their people will be nice to them, requesting them to please go into retirement and let's have successors and let's have more people making more decisions and let's listen to the women and the wives and let's not have wars and things that like dictatorial and monarchical, absolute monarchs and absolute dictators inevitably get into war because they inevitably fear even their own people. And so they want their own people to realize that somebody else is the enemy. Then they can then keep controlling them. And that's why it's not a good profession. You know? But meanwhile, we don't have anything against them as common human beings on a planet that is threatened by one common enemy, which is a giant monster of carbon and methane and things that we've all created. And in a way, it's our greed and our negative mind coming back to haunt us, really, but blowback from our living in an imbalanced and an unhappy way. And we will be more content and more happy and less greedy. We'll be fine. And our families will be fine, and our children will be fine, and our grandchildren will be fine. And Buddhists and Christians and Muslims and Hindus and everyone will agree on that. And then, in the Bright Money campaign, I might like to advise the media and artistic group that will be making the rational propaganda for the Mother Earth, for the campaign, running the campaign for Mother Earth. I might advise them to bring in, the Pope Francis, the Dalai Lama, the Grand Mufti of Al-Azhar University in Cairo, the head Shiite speaking for the hidden Imam in Iran, the head rabbi, the Sanhedrin in Israel, whatever religion, the Baha'is and the indigenous tribal leaders who have a nice earth-centric indigenous religious idea, all of them come and they get into these commercials and they make their voices heard to counteract extremist people who are using religion as an excuse. Some sort of scripture or lack of mention of climate change in a scripture, or lack of scriptures are written or inherited from times when the great prophets taught them about people being compassionate and nice, and they were not speaking to industrial societies where mechanisms can magnify human sinfulness of greed and hatred and violence and murderousness and jealousy and the deadly sins, where they can be manufactured industrially to destroy even life. They didn't quite reach that scale. Although they predicted it could reach that, like the book of Revelation does predict that. Predicts the poisoning of the earth. But it doesn't analyze exactly how it happens. So we'll have religious leaders speaking to the people. I know there will be some Baptists will join us. Some Protestant leaders will also join us, who have an environmental sensitivity. So that's my thing today. Thank you so much. I have other things to do now, and I'm going to be doing this more. And anybody who wants to, please push it themselves, write an article to their paper, that climate change is the foremost campaign thing, and the foremost candidate for everyone to vote for is Mother Earth and Father Sky, if you're not female oriented. It's Father Sky. Because the sky the enemy has been released into the sky. And also into the oceans. And I don't know, Sister Ocean, Mother Earth, Father Sky, the whole family. Okay? Brother Temperature, Brother Fire. All of them are imbalanced and they all need help. Okay, thank you very much.
This video was brought to you in part through the generous support of Tibet House US membership community and viewers like you. To learn more about the benefits of Tibet House membership, please visit tibethouse.us. Thanks for watching. Tashi Delek.